It was April of 1986, and I was in the Army and assigned to a small resident office in Nuremberg, Germany, as a counterintelligence special agent. Not nearly as exciting as it sounds. I realize that April isn't summer, but here's your connection. I actually started this assignment 2 years earlier in June, so very good, very good. In April of 1986, some of you may remember, President Reagan sent a little message to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya in retaliation for his part in the bombing of a discotheque in Berlin, Germany. United States military bombers actually went into Libya and almost took Gaddafi out. Well, as a consequence, things were a little uptight in Central Europe at the time. And as a special agent, we were fairly busy. And one particular weekend in April, I was the duty agent, which meant that I was on call for anything that happened over the weekend. Saturday night, very late, I got a call to drive about an hour north to a Kaserne or a base near Erlangen, Germany, where I was told by the military police that a soldier was being recruited by the Young Communist Party of America. They were dropping recruitment notes in his grocery bags at the commissary. It took several hours before I had him turned over to a psychiatric officer at the hospital on the base. By that time, I finished my report. I was on the road back home, and it was cold in Germany, even though it was April. If you've ever been to Germany, you understand that it's cold into mid-July, then it's warm for a couple of weeks, and then winter starts all over again. I was driving my 1968 Volkswagen Passat station wagon. I got on the entrance ramp to the Autobahn, and I wound that puppy up to 100 kph, and I cranked the heat up. I was driving. I had turned the radio on to the Armed Forces Network, where I was listening to Casey Kasem's Top 40 Countdown, when suddenly there was an explosion. Boom! My ears were ringing. The windshield, well, it didn't shatter its tempered safety glass. It spider webbed. My first thought was somebody shooting at me. Cue the James Bond music. I went into auto drive, I guess. I immediately twisted the wheel to the right, headed over into the ditch off the Autobahn, kicked the gear shifter into neutral. As I hit the grass, I yanked up on the emergency brake, slid over into the ditch, reached for my sidearm. That's what we called back in the day a .45 caliber automatic pistol, which was on the seat beside me. Climbed across the passenger seat, out the door, onto the ground, where I lay there hyperventilating with the gun shaking in my hands above me. It was a quiet Sunday morning. No other cars on the Autobahn. It was still semi-dark. The only sounds I could hear were the engine still running in my Passat and the sound of my heart about to rip out of my rib cage. Minutes passed. Finally, I calmed down a little bit, and I raised up and I looked around. I didn't see anybody. I didn't see anything. I stood up. Gun at the ready. Sidearm, at the ready. Nothing. I leaned down and I looked into the car, and the windshield wasn't shattered, but there was something strange about it. And I reached out to touch it, and there was some sort of a strange film all over the windshield. And I leaned farther into the car, and I looked in the back seat of my Volkswagen Passat, and any of you have ever driven a 1968 Volkswagen Passat, will understand that it's the heat from the engine that powers the heat into the compartment of the car. And that heat is blown directly in through two vents that are behind the passenger and the driver's seat. Unbeknownst to me, at some point, a can of Fix-A-Flat had rolled off of the back seat onto the floorboard where the heat from the engine had caused it to explode. This stuff is filled with fibers that stuck to the windshield, which made me think that the windshield had shattered. The explosion made me think that someone was shooting at me, which led to me on the side of the road on a cold Sunday morning in Erlangen, Germany. Fortunately, I can laugh at myself. Joseph Heller wrote, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you." Thanks.